Around a year ago, I uploaded my first video to YouTube. It was called The Problem with Remakes and Remasters. I still agree with pretty much all the points I made in that video, but since then I've also done a lot of thinking about some games that I believe could really benefit from a re-release. So without further YouTube video introing, let's get into the games. First up is Dragon Quest IX. Originally released for the Nintendo DS in 2009, DQ9 is the only game in the mainline Dragon Quest series to never see any form of re-release outside of its original release. And after finally getting around to playing it for the first time, I can confidently say that this game needs it more than any other game in the series. I won't dive too far into the specifics because there already exists a great video on this subject by Sack Chief, who actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to Dragon Quest, unlike me. But basically a large focus of this game is the multiplayer aspect. Going on quests with your friends was a huge selling point, and at the time of its release over 10 years ago, games like that didn't really have much competition on a Nintendo handheld. Dragon Quest IX is still an enjoyable game to play by yourself, but I can't help but feel like the focus on multiplayer led to many game design choices that don't suit a single player game, such as side quests feeling a bit more generic, similar to quests from an MMO, like kill this many of this specific monster, or even worse, the quest to unlock better classes in the game, such as defeat 10 of this rare enemy with a move that your character can only use when they feel like it, and if your move doesn't kill the enemy, it doesn't count. Tedious quests like this aren't fun in my opinion. I don't mind grinding in RPGs to an extent, but when an annoying set of conditions are thrown on top of the grinding, it just sucks all the enjoyment out of the experience and makes me question why I'm even playing the game in the first place. This, combined with the fact that all the online content for the game is now inaccessible, is why I think this otherwise solid entry in the Dragon Quest series deserves a remake. If we do get a remake of DQ9, other additions could be, speeding up the battles a little bit and giving us access to more class options from the start of the game instead of making us unlock a lot of the better ones. But other than that, I do think this game is really neat. Chibi Robo is one of those Nintendo franchises that's more well known for its inability to be a financial success than it is for its actual games, and that makes me very sad. The first Chibi Robo was released on the GameCube in 2005. It was a super imaginative, open-world-ish 3D platformer that saw a little robot cleaning house, solving problems for a bizarre family, and interacting with a wacky cast of toys that came to life when the humans weren't around. The colorful and cartoony twist on such an ordinary setting, that being a suburban home, strikes a chord with me that most other games haven't managed to. Maybe it's just because I grew up loving the Toy Story films, but I've always wanted to see more video games take on this domestic setting from the perspective of a small thing, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to put it into words, but the Pikmin games take this idea and roll with it just in a more organic, earthy environment. Now that I think about it, it would really be cool if Pikmin 4 took place in like an abandoned neighborhood or something like that, but I'm getting off topic. Anyway, Chibi Robo is deserving of a remake because it has more of a cult following now than it ever has, and I really believe that re-releasing the first game on Switch would drum up enough excitement in the series again to warrant a true sequel, and not a generic 2D platformer, please. Heck, even bundle the Chibi Robo DS games with it and sell it for $60. Sure, Park Patrol was a weird gardening simulator, but it still maintained the charm and personality that the original game had. And the second DS game actually was a direct follow-up to the original in both story and gameplay, but it unfortunately never left Japan. I'm gonna remain optimistic and say that I don't think we've seen the last of Chibi Robo. Years ago, I would have never expected Luigis Mansion to receive 2 sequels, with the third one in particular performing really well critically and in terms of sales. So here's hoping that another series that began life on the GameCube can find success on the Switch as well. Sticking with the theme of remake to revitalize the franchise, Golden Sun, a slick little trilogy of RPGs developed by Camelot, with the first 2 games being on the Game Boy Advance and the third being on the DS. Ideally, I would love a remastered trilogy, but I feel like collections of RPGs aren't really a common thing, as companies like to milk remasters for as much money as possible. So at the very least, remaking the first Golden Sun starring Isaac, also known as one of the few sword fighters that people actually want in Smash, would be a good start, before people forget about this series altogether. So Fire Emblem has been doing pretty well in the West lately. Ever since Awakening came out in 2013, the series has been considered a mainstay by not only fans, but even Nintendo themselves. I mean, just look at Smash. And that's why I want Nintendo and Intelligent Systems to revisit more games from the time when Fire Emblem was still a fairly obscure series outside of Japan, as many of these games truly don't get the attention that they deserve. I would be happy with any Fire Emblem remakes, but I think the two at the top of my list would be Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn for the GameCube and Wii. I think something as simple as an HD double pack of these two would please most fans. These two entries in the series are particularly difficult for most people to get their hands on because of their insanely high price tags. The fact that GameCube and Wii games aren't as easy to emulate as, say, Game Boy Advance games only adds to the demand and in turn further raises the price of these two handsome Sword Boy simulators. So for no reason other than to make these games more accessible, I am once again asking you for a remake, Nintendo. I am willing to bet money that the next mainline Pokemon games announced after we get the Gen 8 DLC will be Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes. The Gen 4 nostalgia is really starting to hit people my age. Just look up Pokemon Lo-Fi and you'll see what I mean. And honestly, there's really never a bad time for Nintendo and Game Freak to put out a new Pokemon game. They might as well have a big red button that takes $60 out of everyone's bank account once a year, or twice if you buy both versions. As for changes I'd like to see in a Gen 4 remake, taking out the need for HMs is a big one, and thankfully that's something we've been seeing in all Pokemon games since Sun and Moon. Other than that, they wouldn't really need to do much else. I mean, definitely make the environments feel more organic and less boxy and grid-based, and of course adding more Pokemon to the region, and small quality of life improvements should go without saying, but you never know with Game Freak, as we've seen. I definitely won't get my expectations too high in terms of how much they change or add to the game. I'm honestly expecting the inevitable Gen 4 remakes to feel like a weird handheld and console game hybrid like the Let's Go games and Gen 8 feel, but at this point I'll be okay with anything, seeing as despite my complaints with the aforementioned Pokemon games on Switch, I actually did enjoy my time with both of them. So either way, I'm eagerly awaiting my return to the snowy northern region of Sinnoh and putting on fashion shows with my Pokemon like it's 2006. So there's my list of a few titles that I'd like to see remade. It's really easy to just say every game I love deserves a remake, so I tried to narrow it down as best I could to games that, you know, would actually benefit from being remade. Let me know what games you'd like to see remade, whether they be Nintendo games remade for the Switch, or anything else for that matter. I'm always curious to hear what other people want to see make a comeback. Anyway guys, I just want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.